Shayna, you have a goal to create 1,000 women millionaires by 2030, right?
Maybe 90 days in, I already had 23 therapists that were working for me, and that business grew very well.
I am in conversation with founder at Executive Signals Group.
It doesn't matter how great your product is because somebody else is coming out with a great product in 3 hours. I just want to know that when I get up and walk out of here, that I'm not going to have a limp and I'm not going to have pain. So when he said
That sounds a nightmare to me. Like if I was told this is a game changer, I believe. I've never thought about it, but it's really a game changer because then you start asking the right questions. So chaos to clarity it is. And this week I am in conversation with founder at Executive Signals Group from Dallas, Texas, Shayna Davis. Shayna, thank you so much for doing this and really glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So, Shayna, let's start from the beginning. You were an occupational therapist, and from there you built the Executive Signals Group. Walk me through the journey.
Well, it's evolved over time. I've been in business for over 21 years. It's evolved over time. So, when I was an occupational therapist, shortly after graduating and passing my boards and starting to work, people were like, "Can you help us out? Can you help us out?" And I was like, "Well, there's only one of me. How do I handle all of these contracts? How does one person do that?" And they were like, "Oh, no, you actually just get other therapists that work under you and you get the contract." So, essentially, shortly after starting a staffing agency, maybe 90 days in, I already had 23 therapists that were working for me, and that business grew very well and very fast. And so people were coming to me like, "Well, how do you start a business and how do you grow a business? And maybe you should teach these classes." And so I started a coaching and consulting firm just because people were coming to me for advice of how it is that I had done what I'd done. And I recognized early on that there is one skill set to be able to do something well. That's not necessarily the same skill set as teaching someone how to do what it is that you did well. So over 21 years ago, when I first started the coaching and consulting, I was teaching small business owners how to be productive and efficient and start businesses and grow businesses. But so few of them could afford me. They were like, "Oh, I'd love to work with you, but I just can't afford it." So that's how I got into corporate consulting. I was like, "Listen, these corporations they believe investing in their people. They have the budgets to pay me. So let me try to figure out the different types of services that I can offer to corporations." And it became obvious quickly that oftentimes the questions that they were asking me were related to strategy and communication, even though that's not necessarily what they hired me for. And so you fast forward all the way to the last couple of years, I had a short stint with a tech startup. And I can remember when the founder said to the CTO, like, "Hey, you're going to have to start engaging with the people that we're building this for and the investors." And they were like, like, "That's not what I'm good at." And so over the years, my consulting firm has just become more around strategic visibility and external communication. So all the way from an occupational therapist to working with tech founders and their and their teams, and a little bit of everything in between over the years.
And tech founders and their anxiety.
Yeah. Well, they don't seem to think they have anxiety. They cause me anxiety because they don't always prioritize. There was a time, and you can probably relate to this because you've been in this space a long time. There was a
Yeah.
time as a tech company, if you had a strong product and the right team, that was the only thing that it took to be successful. And that's just not the world that we're in anymore. So the anxiety for me comes in trying to convince the founder that that's just not the era that we're in anymore. You also have to be able to engage well externally. And, in the environment that we're in now, it doesn't matter how great your product is because somebody else is coming out with a great product in 3 hours. So what else are you going to be able to do to build trust and credibility? Because perception and brand reputation and everything is built outside of what the product is. So that's why I have anxiety, because they think it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because we techies have a thing, right? We have built the world class thing, right?
Yeah,
And we know the technology no one knows, right?
correct.
But
Which
when
is
we
true.
walk but when we walk outside the door, it's a different world.
It's a different world. So that's where my anxiety comes in, trying to convince them that it's like, Especially sometimes the founder can be really good at that. But what happens when other people on your core leadership team have to have conversations with investors or potential customers or the media or being on an industry panel? That the level, the way that you communicate and the way that you demonstrate authority is not going to be the same as it is as they're working to build the team or their lead or the build the thing or lead their internal teams. And it's like, it's okay that you're not great at everything. We don't expect you to be competent in every single area. But I think sometimes as human beings, we just assume because we're brilliant in some things that we should be brilliant in all things. And if we're not, that it's some sign of weakness. And it's like, no, I don't expect you to be good at every single thing that the job now requires. That's why you go get help in other areas and you focus on these things that you're good at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining right now, imagine a CTO of a tech company, right? The guy doesn't even know how to talk in front of the camera or in front of the media, right?
Yeah.
He just knows his stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then you walk him over in front of a camera. What happens then?
Yeah. I was actually, I had a speaking engagement yesterday and someone mentioned something very similar to what you said. And I said, why is it? And I said, and I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear what y'all think. I said, why is it that you think what you know becomes different based on the audience? Like, so what that you're on an industry panel? So what that a media person is interviewing you? You still know what it is that you know. You still have a perspective. Lead with that. You know what I mean? And I think it's just because anything new causes some form of angst. And it's easier said than done to say, pretend like you're talking, to your boss or pretend like you're talking to someone, on your team and hope that the angst goes away. But what it is that I teach, my tech people, and we're getting a little bit out of the scope of the question that you asked me, but it's like, the problem is that you want to communicate based on the features of what it is that you're building.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's usually not what is the most important for the person that is asking you the questions, number one. And number two, if the only thing that you can tell us is the features of it, but you're not sharing your perspective, you're not sharing your point of view on where the industry is and where it's headed and what we have to get right and what we have to make sure that we avoid, those are the things that are really going to build the trust. Those are the things that are really going to build the credibility in a way that the features and the benefits of the thing that you're building cannot do. But for some reason, y'all seem to forget all about the fact that you do have a point of view, that you do have a perspective. That's why you're building the thing that you're building. But you're so used to just focusing on like, that's why this button does this. And that's why it's important that it's accurate. And it's important that it's fast. And it's like, but that does nothing to build perception and trust in the outside world. And where we are today, with technology being a nonstop disruption, we just happen to be in a period of time right now all across the world. Like you're in India, I'm in the United States,
Yeah.
but trust is at an all-time low everywhere. And when your founder and your core leadership team is engaging with people outside of the company, if the only way that you answer the questions and the only way that you present is just talking about the features and benefits of the product that you're building, that's going to actually erode trust even more. It's not going to help. It's not going to help to build it. And then when that next thing comes out 3 hours from now, that is the next bright, shiny object, you don't keep our attention. It's so easy for us to look over to the left or the right of what is being built next. But if you really led with, like these are the things that we disagree with. These are the things that we know has to happen in the industry. I'm going to be like, oh, wow. Now this is actually a company that regardless of what else comes out later today or tomorrow, I actually believe in the people that are building this. So then I want to go work there. I want to invest there. I want to buy from them. And features can't do that.
Yeah.
Benefits of the product in and of itself, it's very difficult to do that.
I'm just curious. Can you give one example, like any live example that
Yeah.
this happened? Like
Yes.
for the viewers to, relate this more.
Right. So I will use an example of a company that I worked for, which is why I decided to go all in on tech. I've been doing this for a long time, but within the last couple of years, I decided to focus just on tech because the technical leaders are oftentimes where the biggest competency gap for these
Okay.
types of skills lie. And this particular company, they were building a product for Wall Street institutions.
Mhm.
And it was going to completely revolutionize the way that these Wall Street institutions were onboarding assets. Prior to this type of technology, it was taking these Wall Street institutions months to onboard one asset, which was ridiculous. And so this fintech product was going to help them to be able to onboard assets a lot faster, which on the surface it's like, okay, what's the big deal? Well, just
Yeah.
imagine onboarding an asset in seconds versus months, how much that revolutionizes what it is that they're trying to do.
Right.
So when they were in stealth mode while I was there, and the closer that they came time to launching, the founder said to the CTO and the head of engineering, "You're going to have to start having conversations with these Wall Street executives, explaining to them not how it works." Because they don't care. That's the thing that I need y'all to hear. They don't care how it works. Think about if you break your leg and you go to the doctor. I don't care that when you do my operation that you're going to lay me supine on the table and do a transverse cut. I just want to know that when I get up and walk out of here that I'm not going to have a limp and I'm not going to have pain.
Oh
So
man,
when he
that
said
that
to
sounds a nightmare to me. Like if I was told this, I would have been panicked like anything.
Exactly. But you don't care about the how, is my point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's like you're going to have to start having conversations with these Wall Street executives about how what we're building is going to revolutionize their industry and give them a major competitive advantage over all of the other companies in this space, how it's going to have them at the forefront of where these types of institutions are going. That's what these Wall Street executives need to hear. You can't go in there and talk about how, and then the first thing you're going to do is click in the upper right hand corner and what that does in the back. Like they don't care about any of that. And so what I said to them, and that's not why I was part of the team, but I asked them, I said, can I ask you a question? And because I'm just curious what your response to this would be. What is your point of view about this industry and where it's headed without mentioning the company name or without mentioning the product? One of them quickly told me exactly where he felt the industry was and where it was going. The other one was like, I was like, you do know because that's why we're building this. And they were like, oh, and I was like, that's what you lead with. No one cares, nor do they understand, nor will they remember the functionality of this. You need to know that so that you can build it. They're not buying it because of the way the thing works. They're buying it because they want to be better than BlackRock. They're buying it because they want to be better than Apollo. They're buying it because they want to be better than TD Ameritrade, whoever their people
Yeah.
are. That's what's important to them. And if you can share with them, like, hey, here's where this industry is, here's where this industry is headed, this is what people are saying we're going to have to do, but I disagree with that, and here's why. Like, that's what's going to make them say, sign me up, tell me how much it is. That's what's going to make investors say, tell me how much you need because I don't understand the tech anyway. And so I think what it is that we miss oftentimes is that the things that we need to know internally to do our jobs are not the things that the end users care about. They
Right.
need to know why
That's
it matters and why it matters now. And what I
yeah.
want tech leaders to hear is that when you can think about what your unique point of view is, when you can think about your own narrative for the space that you're in, that is the seasoning to the conversation over above the features and benefits. If I ask you, like, what's your favorite protein? And you said chicken breast, right? If I gave you a chicken breast that the only thing that I did was boil it in plain water, you're probably not going to be that interested in it. But if I add some wonderful seasonings to it, I marinate it overnight, I give it to you with an amazing sauce on it, that's going to give you a good experience that you're going to want to come back to. This level of external communication that we're talking about, think about it of the seasoning on the chicken breast. No, the chicken breast is the thing that you've built. It's great. I love it. I know you love it too. But the seasoning is what's going to make people really want the chicken breast.
So it's like you need to make them visualize the outcome
Correct.
even
And
before you start telling about how good the features are.
correct. And I think that beyond the product itself, what's important for them to hear is who are you as the leader? Because people trust people. They don't trust products and companies. Not because
Right.
products and companies are not trustworthy, but I don't have trust or lack of trust for a logo. I have trust or lack of trust for people.
People.
And so in this trust recession that people say we're in, if you can lead with what I call your leadership identity, which is your unique point of view, what it is that is your perspective about what you're building and why it's important now, that's what makes trust go up. And I can remember this same company when they were like, we probably hired some people way too soon and we're getting rid of a lot of roles, but we value what you bring to the team. Would you be okay with like helping us out with operations and et cetera, until we get to the point that we really need what we hired you for? And because I believed in the leadership and because I believed in why they were creating what it is that they were creating was the reason why I said, I'm going to ride this out. I believe in you and I want to do everything that I can to help this come to fruition. And I wasn't thinking, oh no, I want to go find another job somewhere else that I can do exactly what it is that was hired to do. I could not have made that decision if I was only taking the product into consideration. And neither are
Nice.
your customers, neither your investors, and neither are your top talent that you need to bring this to
Yeah.
life.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Shayna, coming back to that story, the CTO and the head of engineering had to go out and basically talk about this fintech product, right? You convinced them to do it, right? What happened behind the scenes?
Kicking
What
and
effort
screaming.
it took to convince them?
Well, here's the thing. They didn't have a choice. It's not like this was optional. It wasn't like the
So you
founder
gotta
came
go
to them and
and
said, "Hey,
talk, yeah.
who wants to go?" If you want to go, let's go. The bus is leaving. It was kind of like, no, this
Yeah,
is what you're going to do. Number one, they were the people that were the most equipped to do it. Secondly, even though the founder was capable, he didn't have the time. And depending on the level of or the stage of growth that your company is in, I think that's one of the mistakes that I see tech companies make is that they limit the development in this area only to the founder or the CEO. Sometimes they may or may not be the best person to do it just because maybe they don't, they're not as involved in the building of it as the tech and product team is. And they don't always have time to be everywhere. It's not going to only be, think about back in the IBM days. If you didn't have a reason to know, you don't know who led IBM, you don't know who the head of it was. Then Steve Jobs comes on the scene and it's kind of like the CEO is the brand. But you look at where we are now with companies like NVIDIA and I mess his name up all the time, but Janssen Wang or Jensen Yang, however you pronounce the CEO of NVIDIA, his entire core leadership team knows how to engage well externally. It's not just him. And that's where we are and where we're going to continue to go. So it's a major misstep if we think that only the founder or the CEO is the only one that needs to be developed in this. So what happened behind the scenes? Happened behind the scenes, because they knew they didn't have a choice. What happened behind the scenes was, why are you here? That's the first question that I wanted them to ask. I was like, let's set the product to the side for a while. Because if we're being honest, the product doesn't look like it looked 6 months ago. And 6 months from now, it's probably not going to look like it does now. So we can't spend a whole lot of time thinking about that. Although I'm not saying that what the comms and the PR people and the marketing people tell you to say is not important. I'm just saying we don't rest only on that. So I said, the question that I have for you is, why are you here? Right? Like, what is the reason why you're so passionate about building this thing? What is the reason why it's important to you to work on this project when, quite frankly, you could be anywhere working on anything? You know what I mean? It's not like with your amount, these were some of the most brilliant minds in the business. You know what I mean? Like if I told you the
Yeah.
projects that they had helped to bring to market, you would be like, holy smokes, this is top
Yeah.
1% of
Right.
talent here. And I said, but so why are you here? Because you could be anywhere in the world working on anything. Why are you here? And so they started to share like why this was important to them. You know, it's important to us that it not be reserved for the wealthy to be able to invest in certain, like they just started to share their perspective. And I was like, and so if we just think for a moment, like, what is going to happen in the world, or what are things going to be like if something doesn't change? And they started really just leaning back and just having a conversation. I said, that's the exact way that you talk. That's the exact way that you answer questions. That's exactly with what you lead with. You don't walk into a room, regardless of who that room is, whether it's investors, whether it's your customers that are going to be purchasing this, or whether it's an industry panel. You don't walk into those rooms and immediately go to the features. That's not what people care about. I was told in marketing, everybody's tuned into the same radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me? So you have to lead with, why does this matter, and why does it matter now? And why does it matter at large? Because that's going to draw people in, and then it almost doesn't matter what the feature of the thing is, because they've now bought into why this matters and why it matters now and why it affects the world at large. Now they knew those things, but they've never been trained to add those things in. They've been trained to lead with, this is what the functionality is, this is what it does, and this is how we're going to make it. This is how we're going to make it better. Like right now we can do it at 2 minutes. Our goal is over the next 30 days, we're going to get that down to 45 seconds. Nobody cares about that but y'all. You know what I mean? Like the
That's
outside world doesn't care about
that's
that.
true.
That's not what they're buying into. They're not buying
Yeah,
into 2 minutes
exactly.
versus 45 seconds.
Exactly. And that is, I guess you mean by the competency gap, right?
Yes.
So,
There's usually major competence when it comes to building, scaling, and leading your teams internally. So, what it is that you do when you're at your desk, competence is clearly not an issue. When you have to start engaging outside of the organization, and it's now up to you to represent your company with trust and credibility outside of your peers,
yeah.
that's usually not what you're competent at, nor is it what you're comfortable doing. And that's okay. But I bet you there are people that are listening right now that are like, I've never thought about the answers to those questions, but now that she's asking them, I know
Yeah.
what my answers are too. You have a perspective. It's not like you're listening to this like, I have no point of view. I have no perspective about my industry and where it's going and what I think has to happen and what it is that I think we're getting wrong. Do you know anyone? That is a techie,
No.
as you use the word, that
Yeah.
doesn't they have the answers to that. They've just
Yeah.
never been thought. They've never been taught to think about adding those things in when you're talking about what it is that you're building. We're taught to go straight to what it is that's important to you when you're doing the building.
And Shayna, you also spoke about trust recession. That's
Yeah.
new for me. What is trust recession?
So, right now, at the time of this recording, it's spring of 2026. They're saying that trust is at an all time low. We don't trust our government. We don't trust people. We don't trust technology. Like things are just happening at a pace that people are skeptical, right? Like people are scared of AI. They love it and are terrified of it at the exact same time. People question, like there's just a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
So I've heard, that's not my terminology, but I've heard people refer to everything that I just described as a trust recession. Like we're actually in a period of time where there's not as much trust as there once was, call it, I don't know, ten years ago. And we're all having to, I think there's three things that every company is dealing with. We're in a war over talent, trust gaps are widening, and we're being disrupted by technology. And while we cannot control those signals that are being sent to our company, we can control what signals our leadership is sending back to the market, and that's what it is that we're talking about now. And the companies who have leaders who are credible when they're visible externally are going to help be in a position to be able to overcome those three different challenges that I named.
And when we talk about this trust recession, right? One thing that being in the tech industry, I hear a lot every day, right? Is companies cutting down on their headcounts, right? There is a recession going on. They are letting people go because AI can do better job than those people. But
Yeah,
those people have come in trusting the brand, trusting the company. They have given their time.
yeah.
Imagine the kind of feeling they have that they've been replaced by AI.
Absolutely. I believe that what it is that we're talking about now, although I focus on the impact that it has externally on behalf of your company because that's what my firm does,
Yeah.
I do believe that it has implications inside as well. Because one of the things that happens is that it's very easy for us to be seen as just a doer inside of an organization and not necessarily a strategist. And so even when we're sharing our perspectives and our point of views in leading with what I call our leadership identity inside of the organization, that sometimes can help you be seen as a strategist and not a doer. And when they're deciding who's going to be let go, oftentimes it's the ones that have been perceived as simply just a doer that we think we can easily replace with a machine. However, I think that most smart companies recognize that you're never going to be able to completely replace all humans. And if we're using AI properly, there still needs to be human strategy that is
Right.
directing how the technology is being used. So if you want to increase your chances that you're one of the humans that is retained to help be the strategy that drives how your company is using the machines, start showing up internally, leading with your leadership identity, because then at least then you're seen as the strategist and not just the doer, and that will at least help increase your chances that maybe you may not be the one that they think can be replaced with a machine.
Yeah, that's truly important that you have to evolve with time.
Yeah.
And but one there is one mindset issue with all the techies, right? Being a techie, I'm a techie. I know tech and I can talk in the language of tech
Yeah.
and I can talk in the language of skill I have, right?
Yeah.
But then when you ask me to become a strategist or a leader, that transition is very, very difficult because
Yeah.
there I cannot substantiate, right? I cannot say that, oh, I wrote this much of code in a day. I build a feature in this feature in 1 week, and there, as opposed to that, this conception is in my mind, like basically, oh, I am going there and talking about blah 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 blah, and I'm all day talking, and that's not work.
You know why? It's a different part of your brain, and that muscle just has not been built. So my
Yeah.
mentor says we're in the strategy gym right now. And so the more that you're in this strategy gym and you're starting to think about some of the things that we're talking about now and being more intentional about that, that muscle will build and eventually it will become stronger. Just like you didn't come out of the womb with that part of your brain being strong as it relates to the tech, right? Like you built
Yeah.
that muscle over time. And so
Yeah.
since this is a muscle that you have not had to use in the past, and it's now a muscle that will have to be used, it's just a little atrophied. And you have to get in the strategy gym and start building that muscle. And then after a while, it won't even be anything that you have to think about. You'll be able to use that part of the brain just like you use the part of your brain that you're using, to build your tech.
So, Shena, but it is very difficult to cross that thin line, right?
Yeah.
From a doer to slowly becoming a strategist. So, if I
Hmm.
ask you, like, based on your experience, and you've helped so many people, right? If I ask you, what is the first and very easiest step towards this for any techie?
Right. So, you know how you guys have OKRs, right? Like I always called them KPIs until I worked for a tech startup. And then I was like, what's an OKR? Is that not the same thing? But anyway,
Yeah.
you have certain things that you're measuring. Do you ever think about why am I measuring each of the metrics that I'm measuring? When I think about strategy, I think about strategy being the why behind the how. If you're not already thinking about why you're doing the how, then it's going to be very difficult for strategy to be part of this. But if you are thinking about, let's just pick one thing that you're measuring, and you start by asking yourself, why am I measuring this? So let's just say, for example, you're measuring something that the target is for it to be a 5, right? I'm just going to keep this as plain as
Yeah.
possible. If the target is for it to be a 5, you have to ask yourself, why is it important for it to be a higher number than what it is now? If it becomes a higher number than what it is now, what happens? If it doesn't become a higher number than what it is now, what happens? And why are those things important? I can guarantee you probably know the answers to that. You've just not had to think about it because somebody else is usually thinking about that for you and
Right.
just telling you your job, Mr. Thacker, is to get this to a 5. They may or may not have shared with you why it needs to be that, what happens if it doesn't. And so
Yeah.
that's the first part of strategy is figuring out why we're doing what it is that we're doing and what's going to happen. Like, what's the future perfect, if you will? I've heard somebody refer to it in the past. What's the future perfect that can be described if we meet it? And what's the downside or the risk, if you will, that happens if we don't meet it? And so, if we can start thinking in whys, that's the way that we begin to build that strategy muscle.
Okay, so it's not that hard actually now
No,
that I can think of. It's just like it's on the back of our head,
correct.
but we never thought about it, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely a why behind everything. It's
Yes.
just we don't worry about it and we just focus on, okay, what am I going to get done today, right? But
Correct. And
if
why does it matter to us? And then why does it matter to the end user? Why does it matter to any adjacent stakeholder? Because you have multiple different stakeholders in
yeah,
anything that you're building. Why does this matter? Not just for the particular widget, but also why does it matter for all of the stakeholders? If you start thinking like that, like strategy will just become second nature because you're always thinking about why you're doing what you're doing and why other people should care.
this is a game changer, I believe. I've never thought about it, but it's really a game changer because then you start asking the right questions.
And you
And then
start
you
saying the right things when people
right
ask you
things. Yeah,
questions.
exactly,
When you
exactly.
find yourself in these situations, now
Yeah,
you're not like, oh, shoot, I don't have anything to talk about other than the features. No,
yeah,
because now you're actually thinking about why you're doing what you're doing and why it's important and why it matters. And so it's like those are the types of things that you lead with. And now I trust you and your company so much more than I would have if you didn't. And especially when you're side by side with your peers, imagine if tomorrow you were on an industry panel with other people who either worked at similar companies or had similar like technical experiences, and someone is asking questions about, just the state of the whatever, you know what I mean? Like you're on a
yeah,
fintech panel with other people who are, techies in the fintech space. And as the moderator is asking questions, you're answering the questions by leading with the things that we're talking about now. And you can say, and that's why it was important for us to make sure that what we're building had this particular functionality. You're going to be so much more memorable, and not just for memorable sake, but you're going to increase your funding, and you're also going to have greater market share. You're going to be able to attract and retain top talent. Like there's so many implications when you can lead with this level of thought leadership instead of just regurgitating the bullet points that the comms people probably told you to memorize. It's like, hey, I could have read that on the website. I didn't need to sit and listen to you talk
yeah.
for 30 minutes if you're just going to tell me what I can find online.
Or probably I will just talk to a AI LLM, and that's
Right.
going to narrate that for me
And
while
that's
I'm
it.
driving, right?
Right.
I don't even need to go to your website. But when you go in front of them with a confidence that, hey, I know your business,
Yeah.
I know what problem you're facing,
Yeah.
and don't worry about the tech. That's I am doing every day, right?
Correct.
But I know your language, right?
Yeah.
That
Have you
builds
ever
a
heard the
different
saying?
level of trust.
Of course. Of course. Have you ever heard the saying, people don't care how much you know until they
Yeah,
know how much you care?
right.
And it's kind of what it is
Absolutely.
that we're talking about here. If you're talking to, so I was at a conference and they were talking about how when it comes to infrastructure of a city and a society, how important water is, and
Yeah.
how most major cities are probably going to run out of water. And it's like, we think about all of these other components, but we underestimate how important water is. So the person who was giving this information was someone who served on the city council. Oftentimes, when I've heard government officials talk, the only thing that they talk about is the policies they have in place and what it is that they're going to do. But they don't necessarily lead with like why this matters, why it's important. And so for this city councilwoman to have actually thought about, like, I remember it. I can remember exactly what it is that she said when she was like, we talk about roads and, all the other things as it pertains to infrastructure, but we're not really thinking about water. And if we don't have an adequate water supply, then society does not exist. You
Yeah.
know, the
Yeah.
AI that you guys are so wowed by will not exist because you can't keep the data centers cool. Like she's going into all of the why. And so
Right.
now when she talks about the policy that she's wanting to get passed, and she's asking people to donate money because they need $20 million to dredge the lake or whatever the correct terminology is, now you can understand why. But if she had just led with some of the other technical aspects, I don't know that she would have gotten the same level of response. And for her, response was money. We need to have fundraisers. We need people to give. We need to do this, this, and this. And this is why it's so important. And now I'm like, oh wow, I need to try to figure out how I can give to this cause. But very seldom am I in any industry event and people are really leading with what this is, why it matters, and why it matters now, and why does it matter globally, not just to the small nucleus of people that we may think it applies to.
Yeah. Can't agree more. That's
Yeah.
really true. It's a different perspective of putting your thing forward,
Mm-hmm.
and then people start to visualize the outcomes. That
Yeah.
is really important.
Think about if you're trying to raise money for your
Yeah.
tech company. This same event that I was at, there was an investor panel at the end, and all of the investors were saying, every tech company that comes before us asking for money has a brilliant idea for the tech. That's the table stakes now. So he was like, it's not that we don't care about the technology at all, but we're more investing in the founder and the people who are leading the teams. We're more trying to figure out, is this a team of people that we believe in and that we can get behind? Because tech is going to come and go, it's going to evolve over
Yeah.
time. I don't care so much about the specific benefits, or not the benefits, but I don't care so much about the specific features. What I'm really investing in is the people that are behind this. Because if things change or things shift, because they will, I know that this is the right team leading this, and they'll figure out the technology. Because after, like you said, that's what you've spent your whole career mastering
Yeah.
is figure, like, don't worry about the technology, we got that,
We
we
got
just
that.
need
Yeah.
money to help us bring this thing to life. But
Yeah.
we got a whole army of people in here that have brilliant minds to build the thing. Don't worry about
Right.
that. Bet
Yeah.
on me, bet on them as people.
Yeah.
And the only way that I can do that is if you're sharing your perspective and you're telling the stories that show me who you are, what it is that you stand for, and why this thing matters. That's what I'm betting on. And so are the people that are coming to work for you as well most of the time.
Awesome. Awesome. And Shena, let's move on to the podcast.
Yeah.
So my interesting area is like, always good to speak with a fellow podcaster. Tell us about that journey. How did
Yeah.
that happen?
So I started my podcast 6 years ago,
Okay.
right before the pandemic. I think my first episode launched after we were already in lockdown. Obviously, it could not have seen that coming. And if I'm being honest, I started a podcast just because it seemed like it was the thing to do. I don't know that there was any real strategy behind it. It was just kind of like, hey, this is the modern day media vehicle.
Yeah.
Everybody's starting a podcast. I guess I
Yeah.
should have one too. It's a great way for you to access audiences that you don't already, have access to. And so I started the podcast about 6 years ago. And in the beginning, it was way too much of a labor of love. I was like, I'm not going to be able to keep this up. The editing and the making sure that your titles are SEO optimized
Yeah.
so that the thing can be found, because it's one thing for you to, but if you just think about everything that goes into it, it's like you have to find the guest. You have to schedule time to record. You have to edit it. You have to publish it. You have to promote it. It was all these things that I was like, oh, wow, I don't think I want to keep doing this. And I had kind of made the decision that I wasn't going to do it anymore, right? And so then I started hearing people talk about podcast rankings, and people were like, oh, my show's in the top 20%, my show's in the top 10%, and different things like that. And I was like, oh, that's a thing. Like, I wasn't
Yeah.
really
Yeah. Yeah.
studying the podcast industry like that. I was just producing what I thought was good content that my audience wanted to hear, and I wasn't thinking about anything else. So I was like, out of curiosity, I just wonder where mine's at. I looked it up and I was in the top 3% globally. So that means out of like 3.5 million podcasts, I was in the top 3% at 3.5 million shows. And I was like, what? Maybe I'll, keep doing this after all. And so then I started looking more closely at like, well, what is, I don't know what I did specifically to get in the top 3%, but then it caused me to start looking at, if I'm going to keep doing this, it has to matter. Because that's what I was thinking to myself. Like, I'm not really tracking money that's coming from this, or I'm not tracking like some of the different things that, that you would measure internally. And so then we just started getting more strategic about focusing on the things that were really going to move the needle, and stop doing some of the things that didn't matter as much, like editing. I stopped editing out every ah.
Yeah.
The only time I edit now is like, obviously we put an intro and an outro. Sometimes there's a commercial or something in the middle, but we don't overly edit. If somebody coughs, well, guess what? People cough. Like, what's the big deal? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not editing it out because, a person coughed or, whatever. And so it's been an interesting journey. Every year I say I'm not going to do it anymore, and then somebody convinces me of a reason why I need to keep doing it. I told myself yesterday I wasn't going to do it anymore, but I bet you you'll find me a year later I'll still be doing it.
And one of the challenges, like, in the initial days, nobody listens to your podcast.
Yeah.
Nobody, you got no views, you got no likes, you got no comments, and you're just refreshing that screen to see, oh, I got one more, I got
Yeah.
one more. I'm
And the
I'm sure.
people that are listening that are probably not going to comment, it's very similar to social media in that
Yeah,
in that regard. But there are times that I go places and people are like, "Oh, I listened to your show and I love your show and here's why." And you're like, those are the types of things that are like, okay, I'll probably keep doing it because people tell you that it's impacting them. Or I'll tell you what was even more neat.
yeah.
I go to the mailbox last week and there's a large envelope in my mailbox. I have no idea what it is. I open it up and I take it out, and it is a beautifully designed full color magazine. And there's a post it note on the front that says, "You are featured on page 20." And I was like, what? Never heard of this magazine before. I know that I have not written an article. I know no one has asked if they can feature me. I turned to page 20 and I can tell by it looks like it looks like as though the article was written by me. At the bottom it has my name in my bio and it has my picture. And
Yeah.
as I'm reading it, I can tell that they've listened to a podcast episode. Because there's no
Oh,
way that they would have known to say the things that they said had they not have listened to one of my episodes. So someone took it upon themselves. Now it was self-serving for them as well because it was a quality article that was probably, valuable for the people that were reading it. But if it weren't for my podcast, they wouldn't have had that episode to take and probably feed into AI and say shape an article for my magazine based off of this interview. So I'm like, huh, I guess it's impacting people even when I don't want to keep doing it.
wow. I mean, I hear stories like I started doing podcasts only 40 episodes right now.
Yeah.
But then I took an interview of a vice president in a company, right? And 1 month later, she just called me up and said, "Hey, Piyush, you know what happened? There's a young chap who wanted to join the company, but he really didn't know about. He knew a lot about the company and from the website and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but he couldn't really connect with humans, some people talking about the company and what type of culture and people are there. And
Yes.
in that podcast I'm talking to her about all of that, so that guy listened to this podcast and decided to join the company, right?
And it
That,
further proves the whole reason that we've been having this conversation for the last 50 minutes.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
When people in your organization are engaging externally, it makes a difference. Those are
Yeah,
the types of things that cause people to make decisions. It's how we decide what companies we're going to work for. It's how we're going to, and just imagine if the only exposure they had to working for that company was maybe somebody in HR that could just tell them what the job description was and what the compensation package is. That's not
yeah,
enough,
that's not enough.
especially for a top performer because they have options. So you just further prove the point even more is that when you have people representing your company, they are ambassadors. And the way they engage externally is going to shape how people make decisions, whether that decision is giving you money or coming to work for you or any other thing that you might be measuring.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Shayna, one more thing that all of the podcasters have faced is, like, you plan everything, right?
Yeah.
Then you figure out on the day you're recording the podcast, either the guest's internet is not working or your internet is not working.
Yeah.
And that is really, really, like, it lets you down. I'm sure you must have faced this kind of situations also.
It affects me more as a guest as it does a host because I can't tell you the number of times just because I do a lot of guest interviews as
Yeah.
well. I've done hundreds of these. And just within the last couple of months, I get up in the morning, I put makeup on, I get ready, to look presentable to do the show. And then 5 minutes before, their power has gone out. It's like, there's, now there are some guys that it's like, oh, I have a stomach bug. And I'm like, you knew that yesterday. You knew that
Yeah,
early this
yeah,
morning. You could have
yeah,
let me know before now. But
yeah.
that's when it ends up becoming interesting. And they're so apologetic. And I'm like, you didn't have any control over the weather. It's okay. Stuff like that happens. So I find that it affects me more as a guest than it does a host. Very seldom do I have guests that like don't show up or stuff like that. But the hosts are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. My child just fell and broke his arm. Can we reschedule?" And
Oh,
I'm like, "No, we
yeah.
can't reschedule. Just tell your child to wait." Like, of course we can.
And one of the biggest problems that I face here in India is like basically everything is perfect, right? Your internet, your light, the guest is okay, everything is perfect. And then there is a big background noise happening outside
Mhm.
your building, right?
Yeah.
Somebody is really, really happy today and he's playing musics and drums like anything. And then you're sitting like, okay, when this is going to end, and then it's very embarrassing in front of the guests that okay, but then they understand that you cannot control everything, right?
I had to change the day. One of the days that I was recording my episodes because it ended up that it never that was the time that my lawn people came, and so they would be literally outside of the window cutting the grass and blowing the blower. And it finally dawned on me, like, dum dum, like switch the day that you're recording. This is the day that he comes every other week. Like, why do you even have this as an option for people to choose to record during this time?
That's really like, sometimes it becomes really frustrating, and you as a host, you're thinking, oh man, why am I doing this? I should
Yeah.
stop doing it from tomorrow. And then the next day you wake up and you say, oh, this is another guest that I want to take interview of, and then you are then again ready to
Yeah.
go down the same road.
I kind of just had to let some of it go too. I thought, you remember like even back when video first came out, videos were overly polished and professional and
Yeah.
perfect. And I don't mean professional in like you should not care about the level of professionalism you're doing, but they look like they were done in a studio. And I've been told in recent years that that's not necessarily as relatable.
Right.
People don't want to see perfectly polished things, and I kind of adopted the same mindset with the podcast as well, is that people recognize that we live in a world that is not perfect. And so if something happens and I have to say, I apologize for that my lawn guy is probably right outside the window all of a sudden, like, I don't think people are sitting there thinking like, oh, this was the worst podcast ever because she made mention of that. I think they're like, oh, wow, this girl is like actually relatable.
Relatable. Yeah, because
And if I
we all
hire
are
her,
like
this is
that. Yeah.
probably I know what I'm going to get because I can kind of
Absolutely.
see her personality.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, it's fun. And the best part of doing podcast is like you get to know a lot of new people. You
Yeah.
make a lot of new friends. You get to learn a lot of things. So it's
Hmm.
really good way to evolve yourself. And also then you become a more from intrinsic to extrinsic kind of person,
Yeah.
or I would say introvert to extrovert, where where you start expressing yourself, right? And
Yeah.
then that fear of what people will think about me is gone.
Yeah, I was interviewed by a founder and CTO last week, and he said the things that you're talking about, me having a podcast has helped with that. He said I started off having a podcast where I was just interviewing other tech people, and I didn't have to develop that muscle like you're saying
Yeah.
because I was talking to other people. But he's like, but now that I've started interviewing other people, it has forced me to get out of doing things in the way that I've always done them when I'm in my circle of people who are like me.
Superb. And Shayna, you have goal of a goal to create 1,000 women millionaires by 2030, right?
That's actually an old goal. I used to have a business endeavor where I was helping women to maximize media like podcast, etc.
Yeah.
And I just realized a couple of years ago that I can't keep doing both. I can't keep doing both anymore. And so I had to choose whether or not I was going to continue to teach women how to leverage media like podcasts, or whether or not I was going to, focus on my consulting firm. And if I had to choose, I kind of chose this because it goes back to like why I care. I actually care about, because you guys are building such great things that is really going to change the world. And if there's anything that I can do to help you be better at doing that, I personally care more about that than I care about, women maximizing media. There's other people out there that can help them with that.
Nice. And say if someone who is really good at tech, right, wants to go outside his circle and start talking to people about what he feels about things, right?
Yeah.
What would be your advice to where should they start?
Yeah. So the first thing that I want you to do is to do a quick exercise that we mentioned early on. I want you to ask yourself, what is my unique point of view about my industry and where it's going? And if you can't answer that in 30 seconds or less without mentioning your company or without mentioning what it is that you're building, I want you to start there. And if you get stuck, ask your colleagues or the people that are around you often, because most people, they know the things that we say all the time, or the things that we're passionate about, or the things that we're frustrated or complain about. And so I would say the very first step is figuring out what that positioning is and practicing that so that you can become comfortable saying it and actually own it. But then look at where are all of the different places that can begin to show up. Start making sure that you're emphasizing that in meetings inside of your company. I would say make sure that everybody on your team is doing that at least once a month, so that when you have to engage externally, whether that's on LinkedIn, whether that's in any of the public arenas that you may be engaging outside of your company, that it's become something that you're more comfortable with practicing. It could even,
Yeah.
I had someone tell me earlier, like, we're so early stage that it's going to be a long time before we're ever engaging externally. I said, well, then start using your LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Start
absolutely.
looking at what are some of the posts that you can share that is related to your perspective. Or when you find things on LinkedIn that you want to repost it with a couple of lines of commentary where you're sharing your perspective. That way you've already built up a fingerprint, if you will, a digital fingerprint of who you are as the leader, so that by the time that you and your people are engaging externally, there's months and months of y'all's perspective, at least in that one place. And so you can start doing that now. Don't wait until you think you're like, oh, now we're at series B or whatever the markers are that you're having public visibility. Start practicing it now inside of your organization, and start putting on your LinkedIn, because then it'll become a lot more second nature when those other external conversations start to come up.
That's actually a brilliant strategy. Like you keep on thinking about what would be my perfect post, right,
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. Rather than that, uh, find out your perspective, find out a post that is aligned to it,
Yeah.
repost it, and
Yeah.
then put two lines, right? If you're
Yes.
not able to do that, start doing that. Or
Yeah.
just go into that post and post a comment,
A
right?
comment.
No, nobody is worried about what you are writing in the comment unless there is a conversation going on, and maybe that could trigger a conversation, and that could give you some ideas about, okay, this is what people are talking about, and maybe I should create my post around this, right?
Yeah. One
That's
of
a
the
good
other
start.
things that you can
Yeah.
do is in the about section of your LinkedIn. Most people are using the about section of their LinkedIn to just write paragraphs of what is in the experience section. And I just think that that's a missed opportunity. That's a waste of real estate.
Right.
And so
Right.
you can actually think about these perspectives and point of views that we've been talking about today, and use the about section to talk about how you think and talk about what it is that you believe is going on in the industry and what's going to happen and the myths that are out there that you disagree with. Use your about section to demonstrate your thought leadership. Don't use that as a paragraph to just tell me what I'm going to see in the experience section. There's already
Right.
a section for where you've
Right.
worked and what you've done at each one of those. So use your about section
Absolutely.
to demonstrate your thought leadership because people are going to go read that. You know, when anyone's checking you out for any reason, one of the things that they're going to do is read your about section. And it's just a missed opportunity if you're just going to be writing in paragraph form what it is that you've done and where you've done it.
Yeah, that's absolutely bang on, and that is what we techies do. We just put everything. I know this technology, that technology. I've worked with this company for this many
Yeah,
years and worked that company with that many years, and we forget to put our perspective. We forget
correct.
to show our perspective to the world because all of that is down below in the experience section in the
Yeah,
LinkedIn. So yeah, that's a superb advice. That's a
yeah,
superb advice. Thank you so much, Shena. What would you want the fellow entrepreneurs to take away from your journey?
yeah. Mike Tyson has a quote: everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. I want more entrepreneurs to stop waiting until they get punched in the face to create a plan. Create a plan that's going to keep you from getting punched in the face and apply that to whatever it is that you feel like it needs to be applied to. So many of us are just out here doing stuff and seeing what's going to work and then figuring out what we should be doing strategically when it didn't work instead of taking the time to think about what it is that we should do strategically and focus on the right hard things. There's so many, like I said about the podcast. The only reason I started a podcast was because everybody was starting a podcast.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily, I think, what I should have taken into consideration before I decided to do a podcast. And it's the same thing with your marketing or anything that you could think about doing in your business. Think strategically about why you should be doing that and then think strategically about how you're using it because it's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money.
Amazing, amazing. And Shayna, one question I'm curious about, imagine Shayna today, right? And Shayna 10 years back. What advice would you give to Shayna 10 years back?
Oh, wow. Mm, what advice would I give her 10 years back? Keep going. Because there were so many times during that period that I kept shifting and plucking the seed up out of the ground and putting a new seed in the ground because I didn't see the level of growth that I thought I should have. So I saw it as I probably am doing the wrong thing and have the wrong seed in the ground, not recognizing that with seeds, there's invisible results that are happening under the soil before you actually see the visible results.
Yeah.
And so I probably could be a lot further along now if I would have continued to nurture the seed that I had in the ground instead of plucking it up and putting a new one in the ground.
Wow. Wow. And yours is a journey, from early day chaos, then slowly finding out the clarity. So,
Yeah.
how do you define clarity today?
Clarity for me is picking the right hard things because they're all hard. So for me right now, for years, I have been in the B2B world. And I also, for 19 years, I taught other consultants how to succeed in the B2B world. When I made the decision to focus on tech founders, everything that I had done for 20 years and had taught for almost 20 years did not work. Why? Because you guys have your head down and are focused on the thing. So all
Yeah.
of the things that I've done in the past to maybe use like LinkedIn as a prospecting tool. I've had so many founders tell me if I have a LinkedIn profile, I don't even know you've sent me a message request. You know what I mean? Because we're so head down focused
Head
on the
down. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But I believe that this is the right hard thing to focus on. I believe that since you guys are building such great things that is going to change the world, I believe that this is the right thing for me to focus on, because in business, I think all of it's hard. You have to pick the right hard thing. And so that's how I define clarity right now, is what are the right hard things for me to focus on, and then just go all in, 10x my efforts on focusing on the right hard thing. Because if I'm looking for something not to be hard, I just have learned that that's not realistic.
Shayna, genuinely, thank you. This was a real one, right?
Thank you.
And a lot of beautiful insights coming out of this. I'm sure our techie friends are going to love this a lot. Before we let you go, where people can find you and follow you?
Yeah. So I would say go to LinkedIn. I'm Shayna Rattler Davis on LinkedIn. That's the best place to follow me. That's the best place to message me if you have questions, and keep up with what I'm talking about on the podcast and on my Substack and all of the things. So that's a great place to start, is the LinkedIn.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today. You've been listening to Chaos to Clarity. I'm your host, Piyush Thakkar, and I'll see you in the next one.